HRAC committee. It is actually human resources. And just to remind everybody, each board member will be naming someone to this committee, and hopefully we'll be voting on that in July. So we'll have a committee ready to stand up and start working in September. And Dr. Ramey has come up with a couple of optional charges for us, which are in the attachment. So you want to go ahead and talk about those a little bit?
Sure. Good afternoon. Nice to be here with you all, as always. As Ms. Hines said, we did come up with a couple of different possible charges, but this is a little bit unorthodox for how the committee charges usually come, because remember, usually the committees already have committee members, but we don't for this one yet, and so we kind of have to come up with the initial one. We did the bylaws a couple months ago, and so now the charge, and as Pat said, the members will be appointed next month. We've come up with two. The top one would be the one that staff would recommend for this first year with the HRAC. As you remember, the HRAC expanded from our Human Relations to our Human Resources Advisory Committee. And so as we look at some of the work that we're doing, one of our main focuses right now is, of course, the recruitment, hiring, and retention of great teachers and staff. And so as we look at one of the initial pieces, one area we feel like that community committee could be very helpful is in looking at retention strategies, especially as they talk to how we connect our staff to the community and how they invest in the community as a retention tool. I know this is something that actually is also high on Dr. Brabrand's list. In the 5 minutes we had together last Thursday, retention was one of the things he mentioned to me in some of his ideas about, it's the first thing out of his mouth. He's like, you got to hire great teachers and you got to keep them here. And I want to work with you on that. And so I know it's something that he sees. It's an area that we need to do some focus and work on in terms of making sure we not only get good teachers here, but we keep them here. The second one on the list, obviously, is with the calendar, and that relates to a forum topic that got brought up by Ms. Palchek, and so I wanted to include it because one of the thoughts was that it could be done by the HRAC. I think part of that discussion was also we could form a different committee, and if it's not picked up by the HRAC, that still sits inside my purview, and we'll put together the committee to work on the calendar. But especially as we get the HRAC off the ground, I feel like the top one is more kind of in line with the overall idea of the HRAC. But of course, it's the board's advisory committee, and so if there are other ideas from the board, these were just to get the conversation started.
Thank you. And you're right, this is a little bit unusual. We're kicking off the committee with a charge, and so trying to find something that staff already feels like is work that needs to be done. Okay, so that's what both of those are. Megan?
So I appreciate it's always hard to work with a blank canvas. I am definitely easier when something's up there and then I say, well, does that capture what I'm thinking? And I would like to offer for my colleagues' consideration another direction. We have had some really great dialogue about teacher compensation, teacher retention, but also teacher workload. And when I look at these two options, I firmly believe our bigger challenge that we want this advisory board to advise us on how are we doing in our governance. And so I would rather they work with each other and or with staff on the issue of teacher retention with a focus on compensation needs and workload. Because some of us are now, and maybe all of us, are getting emails from teachers who are quite upset, who've been with us a long time but only have a bachelor's degree and are now finding out that they're frozen at step 19. Other teachers in the last year or two have been saying to us, okay, you're going to raise my salary on the salary scale, but it's, still not necessarily enough. We've got the pension costs, and some teachers are saying, I'm only going to be here for a number of years because my spouse is in the military, my spouse is with, the State Department, or we're just not planning to live here for 30 years. And I really want salary and I don't need a defined benefit. So our staff has limited time to go down all these different, avenues. And to me, some of this all takes place in terms of where are we on compensation preferences. But workload is a key piece that we're hearing. Class size, number of assignments and assessments that teachers feel that they're directed by their principals or by this division. So I'm going to be perfectly honest. Number one, I'm not even sure I understand exactly what that's saying. And I think it's just a matter of probably internally when it's being written, there's a lot more that's there. But neither one of these things I think is mission critical to what we're hearing from our teachers. And since I believe in our community, we're hearing teacher retention is such a key component to a great school system, I would rather the charge be on that. And I actually think our committee members might get very passionate and excited about helping advise our board on that issue.
So maybe, since part of the question seems to be what is really contemplated in number one, I was thinking, and maybe the language could be changed a little bit, I don't know, but I was thinking that it would be a conversation among people on the board, on the committee, who hopefully have some HR background, right? So this is not a teacher group. It's a group of community people who have HR background, because not all our employees are teachers, obviously, but we worry most about retention with teachers, it's true. And that they would take this conversation in whatever direction it seemed to go, because retention is about these few things. Is that your understanding? So it would probably, the conversation would probably include compensation, workload, working conditions. I don't know. What were you thinking?
It could, or other factors, and I think it was left broad for a reason, because there are a number of factors that go into retention, and it's not the same for every employee, as Ms. McLaughlin just talked about. And so it was kind of blank canvas, trying to write from a big picture perspective, and understanding that when we ask people to come and work in Fairfax, we're not just asking them to work in the school division. We want them to be part of the community. We want them to be engaged and in the community. And so that was a piece of it, as well as providing both not only professional, but that personal connection, and also thinking about the individuals that the board was looking to engage to advise them and their standing in the community. And so trying to think, without knowing who it is, what will those views, what will they bring to the committee, and what will those experiences be and their connections to Fairfax that they can help with some of these pieces. And so, yes, it was intentionally written broadly with whatever words we want to use, but based on the different factors of retention that can impact that, not necessarily down one path.
So the reason I try to give my third option of language is because in the years I've been on the board, my experience from talking to my appointees is when we give broad, vague language, the committee struggles to figure out what is the board asking it to do. Employee connection and engagement to the community is a piece of our retention strategy. Ask anyone you know who feels overworked and undercompensated. Those are the two pieces about whether they're going to stay.
Sure.
And so I worry that one there, when it says employee connection and engagement with the community, they'll read it as, you got to be kidding me. Now, on top of the other things I do, you want me to connect with the community. So I really respect that you kept it broad, but I think it's actually confusing and might actually have them thinking we're asking something entirely different from what we're actually wanting to get to.
So, and I understand that. And one of their thought processes, right or wrong, that went into the thinking when we thought of that is, when we talk about compensation, when we talk about workload, the people that we really need around the table to have that conversation are employees from FCPS. We need to sit down and talk with our teachers. We need to talk with our administrators. We've done some outside work with the consulting firm on the compensation. We've done that study. And so also, we tried to look at it, I tried to keep it broad so it could have influence from people that were outside FCPS, because to get people on the table that aren't in the division, aren't in teaching capacity or administrator capacity, and ask them what workload means, I'm not sure we are going to get the best information from them. And so while I think that conversation needs to happen and we can do that work, that was one of the reasons we also went this way, was to try to make sure that we utilize the skills of the people that came to the table. And if we're going to talk about teacher workload, I think we need to have that conversation with our employees about how they're feeling. And if that's where the board wants to go, I'm happy to work with our employees on that through the HRAC. I just, again, it goes back to the whole blank canvas and not exactly sure the direction we're supposed to go.
Right, but part of the problem is, look at where the board is on the substitute teacher pay issue that came from our superintendent's recommendation. It wasn't fully vetted, and now we're paying the price from our employees who said, how could the school board do this to us? Now I'm on Facebook watching Fairfax County teachers say, I feel betrayed by the Fairfax County School Board because what it did with what was supposed to be improving teacher compensation, but if you have a bachelor's degree and you've been 19 plus years in the system, you're done, other than a cost of living increase. Those are the examples of where the board has limited time to dive deeply into things. And I guess I will just go back to, if we want to come up with something else, that's fine. But number one, the clarity on that, I really don't understand, other than it looks like we're going to want our employees to talk about their connection to the community. And they're going to say, my connection is, do I like teaching my students? And do I feel like the workload is reasonable? Do I love my job? Period, the end. So I really, I'll yield it now, Ms. Hines, but that first one, to me, if we are not clear, you guys, I can't tell you how many times the appointees get frustrated and then blame us to say it feels like a waste of their time.
Well, and we will move on, but this is kind of the fundamental question we have about an HRAC in the first place. What is it doing that's different from conversations that we're already having in other areas on, things like compensation workload?
Well, but an example would be 4510,
Right.
The 4510, I've gone to one 4510 meeting, maybe twice in my 5.5 years on the board. So board members don't have access to work with our teacher associations. And we know staff say that you guys are really busy. This full advisory committee is to advise us on HR issues. And as the third largest employer in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we should have people helping advise us on, do we have good compensation? Yes, the report was there, but HRSC could have even have delved deeper into, so how do we end up with freezing our bachelor pay, and is that really now served us well? To me, Ms. Hines, what I championed for this, because I said, if the board doesn't have people advising us on human resources issues, then how can we be good governors?
Okay, well, thanks. Let's move on. Mrs. Strauss, followed by Ms. Schultz.
Okay, I'm actually fine with this recommendation, but I think it does get back to the question of what is the purpose of this committee? Is this to be sort of like a labor negotiation for contracts and pay? Or is this supposed to be other people who have HR skills? I am less interested in having a committee that it becomes a direct school board employee association group negotiation on working conditions. So that would be my concern. My understanding is we are to appoint not necessarily the heads of the employee association groups. Is that correct? That we're looking at other people who would have broader HR ties. And so to start off with a broader focus maybe is more useful. We make decisions every year on pay, and clearly we've made huge decisions on all kinds of pay and scales and whatnot, and we are hearing from some people who would have rather gone back to where we were before, but we made the other decisions for a whole variety of reasons. So I wouldn't want this committee to be one where then we work with the people who didn't agree with what our decisions were. So I'm okay, for starters, with looking at it in that way.
Okay, Mrs. Schultz, then Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
So I'm largely where Ms. McLaughlin is. I really don't particularly understand, one, and two, to me, is staff work, not committee work. But there is this disconnect, and this is the second time a disconnect has happened. For me, the substitute pay disconnect of kind of what we thought was going to happen, and then the second it was operationalized, the unintended consequences. It's probably one of the things that teachers feel most comfortable. I get stopped in the grocery store, people saying, "Can I talk to you about the substitute pay?" So, and now it's the teacher lane salary. And I don't ever remember having a conversation that, oh, by the way, X many percentage of your teachers are, basically going to, not have a ceiling. They're going to have a lead block put on the rest of their career, and what the implications are. So things like that, to me, that sort of involve a community engagement piece and bridge between, what the board is doing or has done on policy, what the community thinks, what the employees, pulse is. That's where you start to take over and be an extension of and doing the committee work of the board. What does this look like? What is happening? What are some recommendations that get out of just pure staff work? So I'm much more on that side of things. I think you coming to us and telling us how to better the master calendar, that's a problem. It's a problem. And I don't necessarily mean from the perspective of Ms. Palchik's perspective. I mean just pure out the master calendar, and when we schedule employee development, professional development, whether we have teacher-directed time, whether we keep our 2-week break, all of those things. Yeah, I want to hear that from staff, and I think that's important. But, and to be perfectly honest, I think what you're trying to get at, or what I'm perceiving you're trying to get at with the retention part, is actually addressed by some of the things that Ms. McLaughlin brought up and that I brought up, which is, if you can't get a substitute, if the only substitute you can get is somebody who is your close friend, or if by making some of the decisions that get effected or changed into the budget, then result in, big swaths of our employees being mad at us, those are things that committee work can sort of a little bit more outside of the realm of staff touch on and give us maybe a different lens when we're doing policy work.
Okay, I have Ms. Corbett Sanders. I'm sorry.
I think that when a board member takes its opportunity to exchange with staff should be given the opportunity to exchange back.
Oh,
if you have nothing to say, that's okay. But that was, this is our substantive time together.
I think that part of the challenge for today's conversation is, again, goes back to the fact that we've recreated this committee from scratch. And so I didn't want to come today with a blank slate. And had the committee in place, they'd come to me and they'd ask, and they said, hey, we work with you as the staff liaison. If you gave us an idea of what kind of topics you wanted us to cover next year, what would your suggestion be? And I would simply throw out retention. Retention is a problem for employers in the private and the public sector across the nation. We know from our staff that we're losing 33%, more than 33% of our teachers in the first 5 years, over 10% a year. And so we know it's a concern. And so whatever words are up here on the screen, I think that we can massage those and work once the committee is appointed. But if the board's asking me for the HR umbrella work that I think would be a nice first course for the new HRAC, it would be around retention.
Now, see, that's why I want staff to respond, because that's something entirely different, and I fundamentally agree with you, because what that does is that doesn't hem in, and that does allow the latitude of a committee doing work on behalf of the board to explore what is the problem. Because whether we're losing 33% of employees in their first 5 years, that may not be bad. That may be all the people who think, gee, I would love to teach, and they get in and go, oh, no, I don't. And those are the people that you want gone anyway. So the 33%, it could be horrible. I don't know. I don't know what it looks like compared to other divisions. That's what you want a committee to go and do. Go and look and tell us what are other people experiencing? What type of recruiting are they doing? Are the retention issues based on from whence you recruit? Does it have to do with the fact that, hey, look, you guys cut out your remuneration to employees for extended learning opportunities to go and get their masters and everything else, and everybody else is paying for it. Now that's being insightful. So if you want to make it have a little latitude, and then there could be some subcommittees that go and explore, is it compensation? Is it I can't get any substitutes? Is it my workload? Now we're back up to the 30,000-foot level where that part I would be fine with.
And then I think each year and each subsequent year, they could explore additional items that they identified during the year about what are some of the retention concerns and what are some of the opportunities to improve retention within our teacher pool, right? So I think it will lead to some of the other areas, but as Dr. Ramey mentioned, it was just trying to get something out here so that we could start the conversation. And then for the second item, really, I had asked Dr. Ramey to put that on there because it came out of the forum topic. That's why it's up there. So we just need direction from the board on how we want to address that.
Okay, ready to move on? Karen and then Ryan.
So I'm going to make it very brief. I think it's very helpful for the HRAC, newly formed, to look at the division's retention strategy. I would just be that simple and take out an engagement with the community as a piece of just, okay. No, just simplify it. Regarding the calendar, I think we do need to have a more strategic and engaging process for the development of our calendar. And we need to start earlier in the process rather than giving too minimally good choices as some of the people in the community look at our calendars every year. And so I would suggest that that's something that we do not as an HRAC initiative, but as a standalone initiative, as, just kind of, I hate to use the term after today, but an ad hoc committee on calendars to have members of the community. I missed it. Have members of the community work with you to provide input to the calendar process.
Okay, so Ryan said he didn't actually need to speak. Oh, Tammy, yeah.
Just have a question because I was just blurting it out. I don't understand why you would take it from this when we are, when it does have to do with employees, it has to do the calendar. Why would you do ad hoc when we have this new committee forming? And I'm not sure I would do it standalone. I just wanted to hear your comment.
Well, my thoughts are that they're different people on this committee than perhaps the people that you would have on a calendar committee. I would prefer to have on a calendar committee people that are perhaps faith-based leaders in the community, members of our parent bodies in the community, students, things like that. And this is more of a structure that supports people in the HR space or in the strictly employee piece.
All right, I appreciate you clarifying that for me. So I guess I would disagree. I would see this as the conduit to reach out to those groups that you're talking about. So I just wanted to just hear clarification from you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'll go ahead. Just make one point. As I'm looking at people to appoint to this committee, I have the usual embarrassment of riches. I have a half a dozen people who have extensive HR background in other areas, And so to me, looking at those two choices, it makes a lot more sense for them to ask them to work on the first thing, which I do think I hear people saying we need to rework the language. And just as a general, this is our retention strategy. What can the committee bring from their own experience to maybe improve our retention strategy or at least analyze it? That to me makes a lot more sense than help us build a calendar. I'm just thinking, okay, I've got this person who has 25 years of experience in HR and I'm going to ask her to help develop a calendar. I don't see that as the kind of work that I thought they would be doing. But I agree that it needs to be on today's discussion because we talked about it as part of this. Yeah. So anyway, unless there are any go backs, I was thinking, oh, you did, Ms. McLaughlin had, yeah.
Oh, that's okay, thank you. So, I'm fine if we just clean up the language in the first one and just basically help the committee know that the board is interested in teacher retention and looking at where we are, with the region and what we can learn from the region. The other option, just to give clarity, because I took very seriously what Ms. Strauss's reaction was to some of this dialogue, I am certainly not wanting to turn the HRASC into a labor negotiations committee. And I think it's important for anybody who's listening and might think that's what the board members were talking about. My point is that this board, Ms. Schultz put it best, the advisory committee is an extension of the board because we simply don't have enough hours in the day, and everyone knows we don't even have staff. So this is for them to help advise us. We every year have the employee climate survey. We don't have time as a division, as a school board, to even dive deeply into what's the climate survey telling us about employee retention and employee satisfaction in the workplace. So to me, that would be another example of being able to have the HRSC look at the climate survey and have it, especially as Ms. Hines talked about, experts in HR could look at our climate survey and say, from my subject matter expertise in this area, here's how you would improve your climate survey if you're really trying to get at employee satisfaction or employee concerns. So I'd like to look at, again, division retention strategy for all employees is important, but since teachers make up our largest population, I think we should be clear to the committee that we want to use this upcoming year to look at our retention rates in Fairfax County schools, how they compare to the region, how do they compare nationally, and what are some recommendations for improving our retention. And hopefully that's because they're going to look at.
And if you don't mind, Ms. McLaughlin, I'm just going to add to where the retention is an issue, because it could be that our retention issues are more in elementary school or more in middle school or more in specials or or core classes or special ed. It's the way this is my data. This is my data speech for the day, since I haven't given it.
Okay, so I think what I hear, and we'll go ahead and get a show of hands, that we're talking about the first item, edited. We will trust Dr. Ramey to edit it to reflect our thoughts. And what I hear is analyzing the data on retention, analyzing our strategy on retention, and coming back with recommendations. Does that sound?
He needs to clean up his language.
Always. Well, are we having another work session on this? I mean, the appointments are next month, and
right.
so
Nope.
I can come back after the initial meeting with the HRAC.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling, I'm asking the board, my feeling is that
I'm sorry.
I think you have the gist of what we want. If you want to redraft it and maybe send it back to me, and I'll share it with the board and see if there are any further comments. But,
happy to do that.
okay, I mean, rather than draft right now, but.
Correct, and we'll get it back out so that we could share it with the board, because I believe it's up for action at the next board meeting, the charge.
Oh, that's true, so we'll see the language before we vote on it. Megan?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we do have the charge in place, because these committees have so many, very limited time together, and so I don't want them to lose their time.
Yes, I think I'm hearing that we'll vote on it next month, so they will be in place before September. Okay, all right, so show of hands that we're okay with that strategy. All right.
Okay, we have
Thank
a
you again.
motion to go into closed session. The board will now make a motion to go into closed meeting to discuss and consider the performance of specific employees pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1. Is there a motion? Ms. Hines, seconded by Ms.